It showed up in the morning update email, the kind of routine message I'd skimmed 100 times before without much thought. Halfway down the list, the project I'd been leading for 6 months was there, polished and ready for launch. Except the line that mattered most had changed. Where my name used to sit, hers now appeared, centered and bold, as if it had always been that way. No footnote, no with thanks, no trace of the work I'd poured into it. For a split second, I considered the possibility of a simple oversight. Mistakes happen, but the memory of our last status meeting, her avoiding my eyes when the team praised progress, slipped in before I could dismiss it. This wasn't a typo. It was intentional, and it was calculated. I didn't react, not outwardly, but inside. The stillness felt different. It wasn't the calm of letting something go. It was the kind that comes before decision. One thing was already certain. This wouldn't be left alone by the time this project landed on my desk. I'd spent years earning a reputation I didn't take lightly. I wasn't the loudest in the room or the one chasing the spotlight. My value came from stepping into situations most people avoided, the projects with missing pieces, frustrated clients, and deadlines that already felt impossible, and finding a way to make them work. In my mid-30s, I'd built that track record over more than a decade in operations and client management. It wasn't just about delivering on paper. It was about holding things together when the seams started to pull. Colleagues knew that if I committed to something, I'd see it through without cutting corners. That trust was the real currency in our industry, and I guarded it carefully. This particular project was the kind that could shape a year, maybe even a career. The client was high profile, the expectations high, and the patience low. Every milestone we hit was the result of late-night calls, carefully worded negotiations, and a team that knew exactly what needed to be done because I made sure they did. I wasn't chasing recognition for its own sake, but in our world, credit meant leverage, and leverage kept opportunities within reach. In many ways, the success of this project wasn't just professional. It was personal. It was a reflection of who I was and how I'd built my place here. The moment the meeting began, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple status update. The tone was celebratory, the kind reserved for the kind of win the company could parade in quarterly reports. The project was presented as a model of recovery. Slide after slide, showcasing metrics I knew by heart, the same ones I had chased, defended, and fought to deliver. Yet, with every chart, every bullet point, my name stayed absent. Instead, she spoke of her strategies, her leadership, her ability to steer the ship. The possessive language wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. As her words carried through the room, my mind drifted to the first month of that contract. The client had been on the verge of pulling out, citing missed deadlines and vague communication. It was me who sat on the phone past midnight, reassuring them point by point, breaking down timelines, and making promises I knew we could keep. A week later, when a system outage threatened to halt progress entirely, I'd stayed online with the tech team until dawn, making sure we had a workaround before the client logged in the next morning. She hadn't been there. She didn't need to be. She had me. Then there was the vendor standoff, the one she handed off to me without warning. Negotiating favorable terms in that situation wasn't luck. It was hours of preparation and an understanding of every clause buried in the contract. That deal alone saved the project weeks of delays and thousands in costs. I'd walked out of that meeting knowing I'd earned my place at the table when this project was celebrated. Hearing my work recast in her voice, I realized this wasn't some miscommunication. She had been keeping 2 sets of records all along, the one the team saw and the one she would later use. In hers, I wasn't just minimized, I was invisible. The damage went deeper than stolen credit. It was the quiet betrayal of trust, the knowledge that while I'd been protecting the project, she'd been preparing to take ownership of its very history. I kept my expression still, focus steady on the screen as if I was simply following along. Every instinct told me to speak up, to correct the record in front of everyone. But I knew how that would play out. A public clash where she controlled the framing, and I looked defensive. That wasn't the game I was going to play. Instead, I let myself become an observer. I noticed the small tales in the room. A few colleagues nodded at her every point, their expressions almost eager, as if aligning themselves early with whoever they believed held power. Others avoided my gaze altogether, their eyes fixed on their notepads or the table surface, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. And then there were those who shifted in their seats, their discomfort visible, but not enough for them to speak. It told me everything I needed to know about where people stood or where they were willing to stand. I wasn't just cataloging reactions. I was studying patterns, mapping out who would amplify her story and who might quietly doubt it. More I listened, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a grab for credit. It was calculated, with a purpose I hadn't yet fully uncovered. Promotion, positioning for influence. A move to control the narrative beyond this project. All were possible. What I did know was that a direct challenge here would hand her the moment she wanted. If there was going to be a response, it wouldn't be in the heat of this meeting. It would be precise, irrefutable, and delivered in a way that left no oxygen for her version of events to survive. It started small, a quiet discipline at the edges of my day. While others went for coffee breaks, I stayed back, combing through project folders and archived emails. Every document had its own weight now, not just as a record, but as a safeguard. I pulled the earliest project plan from the shared drive, the one still bearing my initials in the owner column. That was the foundation. From there, I moved to the client correspondence. My inbox was a map of the project's real history, late-night clarifications, scheduling conflicts resolved, deliverables confirmed. One thread stood out, a string of thank yous from the client's operations lead, each directed to me, each time-stamped at critical milestones, sent a polite, non-inflammatory request for a formal acknowledgment of my role. To my surprise, they responded the same day, confirming in writing that I had been their primary point of coordination from the start. It wasn't just helpful, it was NARGUABL. Another break came from an unexpected source, a colleague in finance, someone I'd worked with on previous projects. Kylie forwarded me an internal progress report from 2 months earlier. My name appeared at the top under project lead, alongside performance notes that mirrored the metrics now being paraded as her personal victories. No commentary from them, just the file, a gesture that said enough without saying anything at all. Then I found the one piece that tied everything together. A batch of early budget approval forms, each with my digital signature authorizing. Span. The dates were unmistakable, predating any visible involvement from her. Alone, each item was strong. Together, they formed a timeline too consistent to ignore. As the pile grew, so did my clarity. This wasn't a simple grab for credit, to pad a quarterly review. She was crafting a spotless track record, kind you present when you're angling for a promotion or a cross-department transfer into a higher visibility role. The project wasn't the end game, it was the stepping stone. And if she was willing to erase me from the story here, there was no telling how far she'd go once she had the title she wanted. The quarterly review announcement landed in my inbox like a calendar alert with a hidden invitation. If there was going to be a stage, I could choose how to stand on it. When the request went out for presenters, I volunteered without hesitation, framing it as a way to streamline updates between departments. No one questioned it. In fact, a few thanked me for taking on the extra work. The preparation wasn't rushed. Treated it like any other deliverable, methodical and exact. Each slide carried a milestone, anchored by dates and data. Nothing was embellished. The timelines spoke for themselves. The order of events, impossible. to misinterpret, or a specific contribution mattered, I credited the person responsible, myself included, exactly where the record supported it. No fanfare, no bold fonts, no unnecessary emphasis, just clean attribution in plain sight. I wove the proof into the narrative. The way an engineer hides a structural support, unnoticed, unless you know what you're looking for, but impossible to remove without the whole thing collapsing. The client confirmation emails appeared as footnotes. Budget approvals, neatly timestamped, sat beside resource allocation charts. The internal progress report, with my name at the top, was embedded in the key documentation section. All of it framed as part of standard reporting, as if there were no controversy to address at all. The beauty of this approach was its neutrality. I wasn't accusing anyone, and I wasn't defending myself. I was simply providing a comprehensive project update, the kind that any competent lead would produce. If she wanted to object, she'd have to question the integrity of official records in multiple departments, a move that would raise more questions than it answered. More than anything, Tell wanted to make the truth self-sustaining, once spoken, aloud in that room, supported by unalterable facts. It would belong to the collective record, not to me alone. I wouldn't need to raise my voice or even make eye contact with her for the point to land. The reality would be there, threaded through the work itself. And she'd know, along with everyone else, that some stories can't be rewritten once the evidence is laid out plainly. The review day carried the usual hum of corporate routine. Coffee cups balanced beside laptops, half-finished side conversations, the shuffle of chairs against the carpet. My presentation was one of several on the agenda, cupped neatly between marketing's campaign updates and IT's infrastructure report. Nothing about it looked like a setup for confrontation, which was exactly the point. As I moved through the opening slides, the room's attention was polite but passive. The shift came when I transitioned into the project. Side-by-side timelines filled the screen, each milestone anchored with dates, deliverables, and embedded client notes. The structure was simple. This happened. Here's the proof. But the effect was immediate. People leaned forward, scanning the sequence, catching the consistency of my name threaded through months of progress. Questions followed quickly, and they weren't generic. Someone from finance wanted details on the budget approval process, a process I'd overseen personally. A senior from operations asked how I'd navigated the vendor's resistance during renegotiations. Even the client liaison chimed in to thank me for maintaining communication during the system outage. Each answer came without hesitation, because they were my answers to give, across the table. She sat still, a tight smile fixed in place, her pen resting unused on the notepad. The momentary glances she cast around the room seemed more like quiet temperature checks than engagement. There was no interruption, no attempt to redirect the conversation, not because she agreed, but because the footing wasn't hers to claim anymore. By the time the discussion moved on, the balance in the pot in the room had shifted. My role was no longer something to be defended. It was understood. The facts had done the work I'd intended them to do, weaving the truth into the collective memory without my needing to sharpen a single word. Walking back to my seat, I didn't feel the rush of a win or the sting of a grudge. What settled in was something steadier, the quiet recognition that the narrative had corrected itself. And in a place where perception often outpaces fact, that was no small thing. 3 months later, the change arrived without ceremony. Her name appeared in the internal announcement about department restructuring, now listed under a unit that had little overlap with mine. No rationale, no fanfare, just a quiet relocation. In our world, silence often says more than any official statement, and this one said enough. My own path had taken a different turn. I was now looped into higher-level meetings, where strategy was shaped before projects even began. Invitations arrived for discussions that previously bypassed me. Decisions I made were implemented without debate. There was no sudden promotion or headline-worthy leap, but the cumulative shift was unmistakable. Influence without the constant need to defend it. We crossed paths occasionally in hallways, at cross-functional briefings, during the blur of company events. Exchanges were polite, efficient, stripped of any lingering tension. She never brought up the project, and I never pressed the subject. There was nothing left to settle. Looking back, the victory wasn't in her reassignment, or even in the restored credit. It was in the discipline of letting preparation speak louder than anger. The facts I had gathered didn't just protect me in that moment. They continued to work quietly in the background, shaping how others saw me long after the meeting had ended. Patience and precision had done what confrontation never could. They had preserved the truth without costing me my dignity. And in that, I learned something worth keeping. When you build your case carefully enough, you don't need to shout for it to be heard. Sometimes, the best way to answer is to let results do the talking. What about you? Have you ever seen the truth prove itself without you saying a word?